This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Man, what a week of football that we're going to cover. The Detroit Lions played one of the weirdest games probably in their history. Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions, and the Lions still win. Sunday Night Football, prime time, a lot of attention for the Detroit Lions, and eventually, the Lions' grit eventually paid off. Dan Campbell, in a pre-taped interview at halftime, just really understands the game, really top to bottom, says, hey, when we get turnovers, things are going to turn around. And it's crazy. It's just crazy to think about that this football team's 8-1, 7-game winning streak. We're talking about really intricate X's and O's. Who's going to be the team that could potentially get in the way of the Lions winning the Super Bowl? It's a fun time, probably the most fun covering the Detroit Lions. Welcoming in my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Cuz, how did you experience that game? Even though the Lions were playing bad, I still felt I was this close to putting them at 51% at halftime to still win. But the turnovers were crazy. I just thought it was kind of one of those games where I wasn't getting pissed, but I was like, this is kind of like one of them games where they're going to play bad. It's just going to be one of those games where it happens. You don't play as well. The other team is super hungry to want to prove everybody wrong. But the Lions showed out in the second half and showcased to everybody that if you're going to beat the Lions, it's got to be over 60 minutes. They're not a team to be taken lightly in any capacity.
Yeah, I think I was just more frustrated by the performance because I felt like this was a really good team going on the road against another really good team, and the Lions weren't really showing their best. I felt like the Lions were giving a very C-, D+ type of performance, and I think that was probably the worst part for me because we've seen this team rock and roll all year. And in the back of my mind, there's always this game that Dan Campbell's going to have where the team's just not going to show up. They're going to look flat, and they're going to get trucked. They're going to get steamrolled. Because if you go back through the last couple of seasons, every season there's at least one, maybe 2 games like that where the team just kind of rolls out the football. They show up on the field, and you're lucky that they got their cleats on right. And I thought this might be that game. I thought that first half, you're kind of like, man, this is not your typical Lions. This is like everything has gone against them. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I think it was just more frustration. I didn't really lose any faith, right? This was one of those games where I think a lot of people were shocked. A lot of people probably packed it in. I know my father-in-law basically stopped watching at halftime. He was like, I'm going to bed. They ain't winning this game. That never really happened to me. I was with this the entire way. I stuck with this. I was, like I said, I was frustrated. I was upset with Jared Goff because he was on my fantasy team and he kept throwing interceptions. But I wasn't at the point where I was like, this game is over. I always felt like they're within 2 scores, right? They're within 2 scores. Anything can happen. A couple of turnovers, 1 or 2 things start going their way. You get a good ball bounce. I always felt like this team, because you know how potent this offense is, and you know that this defense can really dial it up. If one of those 2 sides of the ball could get it figured out, it was going to spark this team and it was going to get them going. At no point did I lose faith in this team. I was just incredibly frustrated with them. And then you come out at half and you were like, man, let's go. That's what you needed. That is what you needed. And like you said, you have Dan Campbell doing a pre-taped interview on the sideline. He's just talking about, hey, we got to force some turnovers. We got to get a couple stops, this, that, the other thing. Next thing you know, Carlton Davis ends up getting a pick, and this team is off and rolling. And next thing you know, they've cut that lead basically in half, and it was go time. And I think that resiliency, right, that like you said grit, that ability to basically get punched, get knocked down, but then be able to get back up and to punch back and to be able to keep hitting up, I think was what was probably the most important thing about this team. You know, Dan Campbell came in here a couple years ago, and everybody laughed at his at his press conference. You're starting to see, this is the year where you're starting to see a lot of the stuff he talked about in that press conference, and a lot of it is coming true. And this was a game that they should have lost. Any other team in the NFL would have lost this game. And this team had the resiliency, had the ability to fight back, had the ability to go out there, put points on the board, and had the ability to be in a position at the end of the game to win the game. Not tie the game and send it to overtime, but to be able to win the game in regulation and get the W and continue on. And look, I've watched quite a few Kansas City Chiefs games. If the Detroit Lions play the Kansas City Chiefs, they're steamrolling the Chiefs. Like, there is no doubt in my mind. Is there any doubt in your mind that this is the best team in the NFL right now?
Yeah, it's crazy, right, to think about this football team playing at such a high level. But, yeah, complete team. Offense, defense, special teams. Now you got a kicker as well that has the leg strength to kick it from 60 yards pretty straight. I mean, that's just pretty outstanding.
I mean, look, a 52-yarder and a 58-yarder, like, that is impressive. This is the other thing too, right? I want to play some ESPN 30 for 30. What if I told you the Detroit Lions went on the road to Houston in what would be a scheduled loss? They were facing a team that was coming off of a bye week, basically. They had 10 days to prepare for you. Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions, which is one more than he had thrown all season to that point. 15 incomplete passes, which is almost as many as he had since the start of week 4. Since the start of week 4, he only had 17. He had his lowest passer rating and his lowest QBR all season long. Rushing the ball, your backs got just over 100 yards for the game combined. Your tight end, who had basically been MIA all season, was your leading receiver with only 66 yards. What if I pointed out to ESPN, and at halftime, Houston was a 92% lock to win this game, and your defense was shredded in the first half by giving up a touchdown, a field goal, forced a punt, and then gave up another field goal, or gave up another touchdown on the first 6 possessions before the half? You would say that this team was going to lose that game. They had no chance to win this game. Yeah. And then you flip to the very, very end. You flip to the final, 4 seconds of the game, and they're kicking a game-winning field goal. Absolutely bananas, bro. Absolutely bananas. There was no reason they should have won this game. But they figured it out, and they had the ability to do it. That was probably the most impressive win I think I've ever seen from any football team ever.
Especially with how bad they were playing, man. I mean, that first half was just gross. You think that if Jared Goff is not on, people think that this is how the team's going to play. And you recognize that they just hung in there, and luckily the halftime break happened when it occurred. And really, it just goes to show you that now for the 2024 season, the interesting aspect, the way in which we can describe it is, the Lions' biggest opponent is the Lions. If they gear up and they perform at the level that everybody expects, offense, defense, special teams, if everybody executes, there's a good chance they're going to compete at a very high level. And that's just the funnest spot, because there were times, throughout the course of the 10 years we've been doing this, where the Lions probably could have played their best and still lost. They just had their ceiling was just good enough to lose. And that's kind of what the 2021 season really represented. They made the changes. They figured out Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn were the guys to stick with. And then Brad Holmes got the talent to suit what they wanted. And look, when you have this football team, I'm just really, impressed at the highest level. I mean, you got guys clamoring to be here, like a Za'Darius Smith. If you saw his initial media session, his favorite color's blue. He loves being in Detroit. He's doing everything that is absolutely possible to be able to ingratiate himself to Detroit. Goes to LCA, is already wearing Made in Detroit gear, the buffs, and then on the sidelines is bought in, like with the computer, with the surface, and just showing guys, what to be doing. So it's just amazing aspects of things to be going on. So I'm very impressed with everything that's happened.
Yeah, I think that was probably the most impressive thing from Za'Darius Smith. This is a guy who you could tell has bought in. This is a guy who wants to be here. And when was the last time you could say that about any athlete in Detroit? They want to be here. Za'Darius Smith wanted to be here. The guy could have got traded anywhere, but he wants to be here. And he wanted to be out there. And look, I think it is big on Dan Campbell. I think it is big on Brad Holmes to be like, nah, man, you've played a ton of football. We got a ton of football ahead of us. This was going to be your bye week. Take the week off. Take a couple days before you come back to the facility. Get all your affairs in order. You've got a lot going on. Just get everything squared up and then come in on Friday and we'll kind of hit the ground running and we'll go from there. And they were like, we're just going to give you the week off because it was your bye week. But this guy was like, I'm here. He's in tune with the game. He's on the sideline basically coaching. The guy was like another coach out there for these guys. Tell them like, no, you need to do this. Look, they're showing you this. You got to go here. I thought that was awesome to see. They interviewed him at the end of the game, which I thought was absolutely crazy. When does a guy who doesn't play in the game get interviewed? And they interviewed Za'Darius Smith, and I thought that was really, really neat. This is a guy who wants to be here. Like, I am hoping, this is my hope. I hope he comes out and I hope he has a great season this year, right? Hope the Lions do everything right and everything favors them and they win the Super Bowl. I hope Aiden Hutchinson comes back at 110%. And I hope he has the same gears that he's got before he went down with his injury. Could you imagine if you have Za'Darius Smith on the other side, if they decide to retain him or maybe even extend him with his contract because he's got another year left on that contract? You have Za'Darius Smith on one end. You have Aiden Hutchinson on another end. And they go out and they draft somebody who they feel like can really contribute and they can rotate them in. Could you imagine what that defensive front all of a sudden looks like? All of a sudden, that defensive front is incredibly scary with Aleem McNeil, DJ Reader, who will be here for his second year. You've got Za'Darius Smith on one end, opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And look, Za'Darius Smith, like they said, the reason they wanted him, the reason that they brought him in was because he can do a lot of different stuff. He's not just to get to the quarterback kind of guy. He's a dude who can set an edge. He's a guy who can contain. He's a guy who can play inside, play outside. They can do a lot of different stuff with him. And I think it would be incredibly interesting to watch him play with a guy like Aiden Hutchinson and let these two guys just go wreak havoc on the NFC North and all of the NFL. But all of that being said, coming up with those play designs, coming up with moving Za'Darius Smith around inside, outside, all that stuff that's going to come down the way. That's all Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn had a masterful game plan coming out at halftime. Absolutely incredible. Just completely shut these guys down. I think they had a total of 88 yards in the second half, which is bananas to me. This was a team that was just kicking your ass up and down the field the first 6 possessions. Now, a lot of that was just kind of where the offense had turned the ball over and you gave them short fields. But again, the thing about this defense is, and look, I don't know if it's the same for you or not, but once they get into the red zone, I don't really worry. I'm not really concerned. I'm just like, okay, they're going to stop them. They're going to force a field goal. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but this team gets really, really strong and they get really, really tough to score on when they get within the 20-yard line, when they get within the 15-yard line. It becomes very difficult for you to punch it in on these guys. And so I don't necessarily get too worried when a team gets down into the red zone because I think the Lions have enough to kind of punch that offense in the face. And I take stopping teams for field goals as wins when you're that close. And Aaron Glenn didn't allow these guys the opportunity to even get that close. The closest they got was, 58 yards away where they had to try their own 58-yard field goal? I mean, what Aaron Glenn did that second half, I think, can't be stated enough. He talked to these guys, got through to these guys, and then came up with an awesome game plan. What were your thoughts on Aaron Glenn just basically taking over that second half and putting his guys in positions to make plays and getting these guys motivated enough to where they could really flip this game on its edge and give that offense enough time to get its legs underneath it to where they could go down, score points, and then put this team in a position to win?
Yeah, it was one of those deals where this is why you're hearing buzz on ESPN and all the national outlets, SI, that Aaron Glenn is being considered for, he's going to be one of the hot coaching candidates along with Ben Johnson. And it's now where the talk is it's going to be from more than just the Saints. The obvious landing spot for Aaron Glenn could be the Saints, where he's got ties there, where he came from there coaching, where it was a defensive backs coach, would definitely ease right in and have the ability to change the culture pretty fast. So it's going to be tough, and that's why the discussion has now kind of quickly turned to, oh, shit, the Lions window, yeah, it looked like it was going to be open for a long period of time. Oh, shit, you better win it in 2024. Take advantage. And maybe that's why there's a sense of urgency for this football team right now to be the number 1 seed, try and do the best. And boy, what a way kind of to bring everything full circle. The Super Bowl is in New Orleans. So it's just sick the way in which, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, the likelihood that they both come back next year is, in my opinion, zero.
I guess to kind of double down on that, you've seen it with Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's not afraid to make a change. You go back to that very first year, and they had, what's his nuts? Anthony Lynn as the offensive coordinator. That didn't last very long. Ends up moving him out. Dan Campbell took over as offensive coordinator, and he brought along with him Ben Johnson, who he helped elevate. And Ben Johnson helped put together a lot of the different plays. And the next thing you know, Ben Johnson got elevated to that position. Now you're hearing about Ben Johnson being a future head coach in the league. And he's been offered a couple of times, but he keeps turning them down. And now you're looking at Aaron Glenn, who he brought in, and Dan Campbell noticed something with Aaron Glenn. He's like, look, come over here, help me out, let's do this. And Aaron Glenn, obviously, now getting his flowers and getting talked about as a future head coach. What is your concern level if these guys both do leave? Do you have enough faith in Dan Campbell to basically be able to repeat it, be able to go out there, find a guy like a Ben Johnson who's creative, who can come up with some awesome game plans and do a bunch of different things, and a guy like Aaron Glenn who has the tenor of the room, can get through to the guys, can talk to the guys, and then get the absolute best out of them? Because I think that's one of those things that Dan Campbell might not get enough love for. He doesn't get enough credit for it, because you go back to that very first year, things were going sideways quickly, and Dan Campbell realized it, stepped in, was like, I'm making a change. Made a change, took over play calling, and that season wasn't great, but you found something there with Ben Johnson. He's always kind of let Aaron Glenn do his thing because he's always believed in what Aaron Glenn's vision is, and it's obviously paying dividends now. I think Dan Campbell is a really good executive. I think Dan Campbell, as a head coach, you have to have some executive in you, because you got to be able to let other guys do their jobs. You got to be able to put guys in position to do their jobs. I think Dan Campbell doesn't get enough credit about doing that. Yes, he's a master motivator. Yeah, he's the funny guy who does weird Applebee's commercials. Yeah, he has weird press conferences. Yeah, he's the guy you want to go have a beer with. Yeah, he's all of these things. But at the same point, the guy's a football mind. The guy's a people person. He understands what he needs to do, and he has the ability to put guys in position to succeed. I don't think he gets enough credit for being able to spot talent and then allowing that talent to do its job.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where everybody that looks at it says, okay, the Lions have had success with this formula. Can you sustain that success? To me, I'm just hoping the Lions win it, and I don't really care about the success for the next 5 years. Like, I'll be so satisfied, so happy that the Lions won a single Super Bowl. Going for 2, 3 would just be really icing on the cake. Just get that one. And that'll be the next test is, okay, the goal is always sustained success. Can Dan Campbell, it really is going to showcase how well did Aaron Glenn teach Kelvin Shepard, because I think he probably would be the leader in the clubhouse. I think they stay within. Now, on the other side, many people think Tanner Engstrand is being groomed as well, but there's an opportunity I feel like Tanner would maybe go with Ben Johnson. So the names that you could potentially hear are, Scotty Montgomery, who is somebody that is very well respected and is an assistant head coach. He talks now. Dan Campbell has Scotty talk to the media every single week in the same fashion that Deuce Staley did. So he's helping him elevate in his career as well. Or, in my opinion, if Brian Daboll gets fired, there's a chance he's going to show up on this staff. Could you imagine, cuz? Look at this super team. Okay? Now, I am going to, again, beat the drum for pro DSP and pro Doc. Could you imagine, in 2025, head coach Dan Campbell, offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, defensive coordinator Robert Saleh? I mean, that would just send everybody to the moon. I think you got enough offensively where Brian Daboll would work great with Jared Goff, and he'd definitely work well with Dan Campbell to put together an offense. Maybe even Daboll is the offensive coordinator but doesn't call plays. And you got Dan Campbell running everything, and now you got 3 head coaches running everything. Now you got a realistic chance to go back to back. So I'm championing.
I think that would be a sick coaching staff.
That'd be a sick coaching staff, and I think everybody would love that. I know Daboll's taking a hit because, unfortunately, I don't know if the True Serum would come out that he said, yeah, we just, picking Daniel Jones was crazy out of Duke. It's just like he's missing open receivers, and at some point, the tough decision. I don't know if Daboll could have said, I don't want to pay this guy $40 million. You paid Daniel Jones $40 million. That's a huge indictment on Joe Shane. That's going to get him sent out and back to the drawing board.
In fairness to the Giants, they were in a tough spot.
Yeah.
Like, you just come off a Super Bowl. I think they had one Super Bowl, or not Super. They had one playoff win. They were lucky enough to get to the playoffs. They end up getting the W there. And you look competitive in your second game, if I remember correctly. So I just feel like you were in a tough spot. And I think all of us knew, like, if they got that win, this was going to be a bitter pill. This was going to be one of those things, like, you know what's on the back end of this, and it's not going to be good. I feel like they had to do what they had to do there. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. I think you're right. He would look at his time in New York, and he would be like, I had Daniel Jones. Incredibly limited. We can only do so much.
Exactly. So, and you know the respect level. You know that they get along. So, listen, the sustained success is unbelievable. Because getting back to this year, is it realistic? People are talking about it. Could this team go 15-2, 16-1? When are they going to lose? Because I know everyone's joking around this week, but everyone around the water cooler is saying, man, the next month is like a bye week. You got the Jaguars, Colts, and Bears. Complete disarray across the board, where if you just show up and play C-plus football, you're going to walk away with the victory. That's 11-1. Maybe people are saying, okay, you get to the next round of division games with the Packers and the Vikings, and the four toughest games left are the Bills, 49ers, Vikings, and Packers. So maybe you lose two of those games. I think that potentially speaking, 14-3 is in play, number one seed, but there's a realistic chance 15 wins is on the table with this football team if Za'Darius Smith has impact and everybody stays healthy. This looks like a dream season that everybody should really pause. And I know Super Bowl or bust, but pause, enjoy what you're seeing, because you just went through a stretch of games where you played your toughest stretch without your best player on the road, and you won 8-1. Stop, smell the roses. Yes, talk about the Super Bowl. Yes, talk about the Chiefs and the Ravens. We're all doing that. But at the same token, sit back, puff your chest out. The Lions have a good season. And now we're talking dream season scenarios like the Patriots had and the Chiefs had, where we're talking 14, 15 wins in a 17-game season. Is it realistic?
I'll do you one better. I think 16-1 is possibly on the table. If you go and you look at basically what they've got in front of them, right? And like you said, the big thing is health. They have to stay healthy. Obviously, Jared Goff has to stay healthy. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown. That offensive line doesn't quite look the same. It doesn't quite look as good as it looked earlier in the season. I think Jared Goff, defenses are getting to him just a little bit more than you would like. I think maybe they can figure some stuff out. Like you said, the next couple of weeks here, kind of like these weird little bye weeks, right? The teams you're playing aren't very good. You can maybe get some stuff fine-tuned and get a little bit healthier, come out of these next 2 or 3 games on a plus side. But health is key to go 16-1. But you look, Jags, 2 weeks ago, Doug Peterson's head was on the chopping block. Doug Peterson was going to get fired. The Jags look a mess, right? Trent Baalke, I don't think is a very good GM, and I don't think this team is put together well to succeed. I don't know what the deal is with Trevor Lawrence. This was a guy who, coming out of college, was supposed to be the second coming of Joe Montana, second coming of Dan Marino, John Elway, and he has looked anything but. He looks like the most mid-high paid quarterback you've ever seen. You go to the Colts. You had your quarterback quit mid-game. Your quarterback checked out mid-game. He lost that locker room. That's why they have to go with Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is 40-some years old. They dusted him out of mothballs and were like, hey, can you give us some quality snaps? Now, Joe Flacco has done a good enough job, right? Joe Flacco has won them some games. But Joe Flacco, at this point in his career, he is a backup. Like, he is there to help eke out a game, go in there in some trouble time. Joe Flacco is now the leader of that football team. That is not ideal. Switch over to the Bears. Bears just fired the offensive coordinator. They're blaming everything that's going on with Caleb Williams on their offensive coordinator. I think we can all say right now, Caleb Williams should not have been the first overall pick. Caleb Williams looks like he could be that quarterback that we all thought he was going to be coming out of college. He could be a bit of a cancer, a bit of a locker room disruptor. Then you've got Green Bay. Green Bay's coming here. So just take care of business against Green Bay, right? That's going to be a tough game. Bills are going to be a tough game. Take care of those 2 games. Then you've got the Bears at the back end of that. And then you've got the 49ers at the end of the season. 49ers look like they could be getting healthy, but they have taken a lot of body blows. And the Vikings are still a very good team. Look, it's going to be tough, especially the back end of this schedule, right? When you look at Green Bay, you look at Buffalo, you look at the 49ers, and you look at the Vikings, it's going to be a tough road. But I think the Detroit Lions going on the road to Houston, who's a very good team, that is a playoff caliber team, going on the road, getting punched in the mouth for an entire half and turning around and then stomping the life out of them and getting the win. I think you can talk about them possibly going 16-1. I think realistically 14-3 is probably where you end up, which is better than we all expected.
16-1. You're not concerned about the Bills, Josh Allen going on the road to the 49ers primetime? I know they're getting healthier, but I think one in there. Maybe the Vikings, you did lose to the Packers last year. You're going to have a game where you have a game like with Jared Goff where he turnovers or things happen. It's just tough to win that many games in a row. But man, if you put it out there and it's more believable as you describe it because of the way the Lions play. And I do think that Dan Campbell is doing right by his players with some more Wednesday walkthroughs and letting the players rest, giving Za'Darius Smith some time off, not letting him play. Man, you could do it. I think there's a special season here, and this football team is really rewarding Dan Campbell for everything that he does for them in terms of the rest and everything like that. Are you concerned at all this week? Jaguars took the Vikings to 12-7. They lost. You get Mac Jones again. I'm not terribly concerned about it. I feel like knowing that Trevor Lawrence is out already by the time we're talking about this, I feel like Lions by 21. But any concern at all? I know we talked about the Titans, and that started funky too. Any chance at all you're concerned with a trap game against the Jaguars? It just seems like they're kind of like really in that mode of a team that's good enough to play with teams, but in the end, when it's crunch time, I'm concerned about Etienne. Mac Jones, obviously, smart, but not really athletically talented. I think that the perfect opportunity to debut Za'Darius Smith is now against a guy like Mac Jones. I just think that the Jaguars, for whatever reason, are just good enough to compete and lose. And I just think the Lions are going to come in and dominate.
Yeah, look, Jaguars coming to Ford Field. I think the Detroit Lions have everything kind of going their way. I think they're riding high off of this win against the Texans. I think facing a backup quarterback, look, Mac Jones, I think, got a raw deal in New England. And there are some athletic pieces on Jacksonville's team. All that being said, I think this sets up really, really well for the Lions. I think they get the victory. I think, like you said, the Jags are good enough to compete. I think they compete for probably a quarter, maybe a quarter and a half, and then the Lions just kind of take the life away from them. If you've ever been in a game where it's been back and forth and it's been like body blow, body blow, body blow, and you're just kind of exchanging those, and then all of a sudden you break the other team's will. I think the other team's will gets broken here probably after the first quarter. I think the Lions end up winning this game. I think the Lions go on 34-17. I think the Lions get the victory.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. Fun, get some more stats. Hopefully J-Mo gets back in the end zone. Hopefully you recognize that the Lions offense gets back in rhythm. I just think that Taylor Decker's injury clearly impacted the offensive line. Credit to Dan Skipper, did the best he could, but it was a tough situation. The Texans and DeMeco Ryan definitely understood the mission of trying to disrupt things and bring the pressure. I love their linebacker speed. I love the fact that literally, that's the concern that everybody has with the Lions, is that Jared Goff is somebody that when he's having a bad game is going to turn the ball over at a high rate. And those are the kind of ways that it happens. He's not like he's a veteran. He's not going to just clearly throw the ball to the other team. It's like timing issues. Because the offense is a timing-based offense, rhythm, Jared Goff expects things a receiver to be exactly where they need to be. When it goes bad and the timing is disrupted, the Texans didn't even have Will Anderson, and they were able to disrupt everything. And now you put it on tape. This is the formula. The problem is teams can't do it over 60 minutes, and that's where the Lions are banking on it. So that's your for Lions fans that are concerned about Jared Goff, your silver lining, your bastion of hope is that the Lions' run game, the offensive line, will wear down defensive lines over time. Well, yeah, in the first quarter, maybe teams will be flying around, will have their hands up, but with steady runs, day after day, play after play, that in the second half, that the intensity of the rush will not be the same, and that's money time where Jared Goff can operate. So that's kind of the plan, where they'll weather the storm in the first half, and if they're close within a touchdown, they're very comfortable knowing that they got closers. But again, that's the key. That's the part that you get scared of, is when you play with fire, sometimes you get burned. And please don't let the Lions get burned in the playoffs. Get burned in the regular season. And pretty soon, cuz this is crazy, you and I are going to have a talk about resting players. Should the Lions rest players against the Vikings in the finale? Do you go 2 weeks without Amon-Ra St. Brown? Will there be decisions made to start guys, not start guys? Will there be rust? Who, if there's a bye, who do you want to play? All good talks regarding the Lions. Ones I can't wait to have, because I think Dan's philosophy is going to be to play people. You can't be scared. Maybe a half. Maybe certain guys will get rest that are closer to banged up. So I can't wait, because guess what? This is the talk that good teams have. This rust, bye week preparation. What do you do the final game? Who gets rested? Who doesn't? Finally, we get to have these conversations if the Lions remain the number one seed. And I can't wait to see how this progresses moving forward. Now with our final topic, you put it on the sheet. I know I saw it. You saw it. And on the other side, look, real fast, we'll talk about the Pistons, give them credit for at least kind of being interesting, winning that game against Miami, creating a meme with Jalen Rose. I think now it's going to be forever etched with meme history. It's great. Check it out at Detroit Podcast.
They've got more wins right now than they had.
Yeah.
What?
By January.
January.
Yeah, it's sick. So stay tuned to the Pistons, and we'll talk more about them as this next week progresses. They're going to make their way to the sheet. But unfortunately, it's going to be a situation with the Pistons is that you're going to need them to continue to evolve and close and make shots. But, hey, it's competitive. It's very awesome to see this Pistons team take a step forward. But now we got to talk about the Detroit Tigers, because everything that you're hearing from the GM league, the GM meetings, from the general manager of the Tigers, the president, is that you're hearing kind of the same stuff that you heard last offseason. Not blocking players. You heard, the agent kind of slipped. We all know the agent let it rip to the reporter that the first offer to Scuba was not competitive. That's from the agent. And so the start to the offseason has not been fruitful. It's been tame. And coming off of the heels of a successful playoff run, you kind of wanted that next step of investment. So it's one of those deals that you got to be able to build back momentum. And it's starting off looking like this Tigers team is being cheap. It's starting off looking like, hey, we just need 5% growth from all our players. And you just kind of need like a little bit of the hope side, where you just don't go and say, well, Bregman might not be in our sights. It's like, no. Add to this team. Build the roster. Do what you got to do. Throw out the first offer to Tariq Skubal and reward. It's like, because it's kind of like not rocket science that you should copy the things that other people do. The Lions, when they got good, what did you start seeing? The money started flowing. Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the people that you counted on to help you win playoff games, you gave them money. Tariq Skubal was the reason why we paid attention. And you're hearing the first thing out of the agent's mouth is weak-ass offer. Man, that's the biggest ice down your pants that you could ever see in the history of sports. That's not the message that needs to be delivered at this point in time to the Tigers. How frustrating is it when you hear Scott Harris talking this way, kind of just being this, yeah, we're sticking to the plan, but at the same token, maybe not willing to push it from third to fourth gear, just going from third to third and a half. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty frustrating, especially when you had a bit of a magical end of your season, right? You're not able to duplicate what they did to get into the playoffs, and you're not going to be able to duplicate what you did in that first round of the playoffs. You've seen that with the second round of the playoffs. You can't sit there and moneyball your way to a championship. And that's what this really comes down to, right? That's why you play professional sports. It's to win championships. And what this team is trying to do and what this ownership group wants to do and what this general manager / president wants to do is it sounds like they want to do everything on the cheap. Talking about not blocking players or not offering multi-year contracts to guys. Look, first and third base are major issues. You need to go out there and get guys. I don't care if you think you have guys in your minor league system. It doesn't matter to me. They're not going to be ready for next season. If you're looking to build and capitalize on what you did last year, you've got to be able to go out and spend some money and get some guys. Go out there and get an Alex Bregman. Throw him at third base. That's a primetime bat that is consistent, that can play the position, and is a better WAR player, so he's going to help you win baseball games. You need to go out there and add an arm to this rotation because you've seen going into the season. I think we said we had like 6 arms, and by the end of the year, you ended up with basically Tarek Skubal. Tarek Skubal needs help, and if you're bringing Jackson Jobe along, he's too young. You can't put all that pressure on him. He's a guy who probably needs to slot in as your 5th pitcher, and you need to be able to give him days off. You need to limit his innings so he doesn't wear out, so he doesn't blow out his arm. So if you're looking about trying to build something long-term, I get it. Have the kids. The kids are important. Have your minor league system. Believe in it. That's fine. But you need to be able to sprinkle top-end free agents in. You need to be able to put some adults in this room with these kids and alleviate some of that pressure from a guy like Tarek Skubal. Take some of that pressure off of a guy like a Riley Green. Be able to get some bats in this lineup who can drive guys home. Tigers did a decent enough job last year. You go back to that second playoff series. They did a really good job getting guys on base. There were games where they were leaving 13, 14 men in scoring position, which means you were able to move them around, but you weren't able to bring them home. All you got to do is get 1 or 2 big bats who can drive a couple guys in. That's what you need. And to talk about not wanting to block players, not willing to give other guys who are free agents multi-year contracts, one, it sounds arrogant. And I think Scott Harris might be the most arrogant man in the universe. It sounds arrogant and it sounds cheap. And if you're trying to build a winning product, I think you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And I just kind of see for the Detroit Tigers, it's going to be one of those seasons that is going to be incredibly rough. We're gonna have our season preview. We're gonna go and we're gonna give our games that they're gonna win, and we're gonna again put it just north of 500 because they're not going to do anything. They're counting on guys, again, taking monster steps forward. And you've seen what happened last year. Tarek Skubal was supposed to take a monster step forward. Tarek Skubal was supposed to be a guy. Tarek Skubal right now sounds like he's a guy who's about to be traded or DFA'd. It sounds like Scott Harris has zero interest in anything Tarek Skubal. I'm not sorry. Spencer Torkelson was supposed to be a guy who's going to take a monster step forward. And it sounds like Spencer Torkelson might be DFA'd or might be on the first boat out of here. And it just how quickly it can change. Spencer Torkelson was a guy who gave you 30 home runs 2 years ago. And last year, I think he struggled to get you 13. So, like, what are you talking about, man? Like, the proof is there. Like, you can't always count on that linear growth. Guys do not grow that way. That's not how things work. What you have to do is you've got to find other guys during free agency, bring them in, and help these young guys out so they can continue to grow on that linear path that you want. To me, it just seems like it's a very flawed way of thinking. It seems like it's a very flawed way of putting a team together. And I'm frustrated as a Tigers fan, especially coming off of the season and that magical run that they had to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, it's just one of those deals where you got to sell hope a little bit. I think that you got to kind of maybe say the same thing, but not saying that. You say we got to look at all the options. We got to look at everything. It's going to be very fascinating to look at how everything goes. So I'm just, like I said, it's just when you basically say, and they have credibility to say, hey, we did it our way, but it kind of just feels like you have a chance to take a calculated risk and you're not doing it in the name of development. And it likely indicates that, you know, the money is not like free flowing. There is a certain thing that they're looking at, and that's what's being sold. And it's tough because Scott Harris probably came in and told the boss, hey, this is what we're trying to do. And the boss said, hey, this is our budget. This is kind of how we're going to look at it. And so kind of in a certain way, this year getting to the postseason with this roster, $18 million for the whole roster is, one of those deals that having that happen could, and look at this, our good friend just posted, I got to read this to you. Live reaction. I can't believe, God is laughing really right at us right now, me and you together. And I can't believe this just popped up right in front of my face. From the popular radio host Jim Costa, taking it from the Free Press. And I quote, "It makes sense on a whiteboard," President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris said November 5th at the general manager meetings. "We'll see how they perform and how they respond. First, we have to get Javier Baez healthy for that to even be a possibility. I feel better about the shortstop position now than I did recently as 5 months ago." And that is in relation to Javier Baez and Sweeney platooning next year at shortstop.
Smartest guy in the room, man. Smartest guy in the fucking room.
Dude, it's one of those deals where you could do whatever you want this offseason if you just cut Javier Baez. Nobody wants to see him. The team played better.
You games last year.
The team played better without him.
The spot that you were in.
It's gross. It's so gross to read that. How did that just pop up? He tweeted it 43 seconds ago as we're talking. It's not fair. And of all the odds of all the tweets that could pop up, at the very moment, right in my face, that popped right up. Because the fucking Mac is listening to what we're saying. It's like, oh, they want to talk about sports. Oh, my God, that's so gross, cuz. It's so gross. It's so gross that you just can't give the man money to leave. Like, it probably is like short-circuiting, making Chris Ilitch twitch to think about just giving Javier Baez money to go away. In fact, I'll just say this. I will buy 30 jerseys and give them away to all my friends if you cut. I will commit 30 jerseys to friends and family if you cut Javier Baez. Just eat the money. You will make it up in favor, I promise. You will make it up. Please just stop talking about Javier Baez. What do we got to do to get this guy off the roster? He literally just, it was a bad decision to give him the money. Eat the money. Give the fans what they want. This is terrible. It's terrible to think about. I don't want to think about that. I want to think about the Tigers and playoff runs and the dancing in the clubhouse. And that happened without Javier Baez. And that happens, and I want to see them dancing.
You were a better team without him.
Yes. You could have been in
markedly.
Yeah. And so all we got to say is this. Spending money doesn't predict that you win, but it almost prevents you from winning if you don't. The two teams
Correct.
that were in the World Series were spending buku bucks, north of $200 million each. So, and you got to recognize that Shohei Ohtani basically made the Dodgers money pretty much right away. Publicity, sales, they got a ring already. So make this baseball team better. Give them a good chance. Give these players a good chance. And there's nobody worried about the young players getting blocked if the person coming in is better. And that's where the Tigers are. I'm hoping that some of this is just kind of like one of those deals where they can't just be like, yeah, we're open for market, because then all the agents are greedy motherfuckers and they just want to be like, oh, you need this player? Okay, we're going to start at $16.5 million. And the Tigers like, damn it, we want to go 12. So I get that part of it where you can't just be like, I want that, because when you say it like that and everybody knows it like that, then the agents are just like, all right, 2 years, $35 million. Thank you. And the Tigers are like, shit, we need this for like 19, 20. So I can understand that from one side of it, but from the competitive side, I want to throttle it down. Like the Lions went from 3 wins to 8 wins to NFC Championship. Now, baseball's different. I know it's a slow burn, but this baseball team with 2 moves can be competing to get into the World Series with the pitching staff. It maybe not win it, but, I just don't want to see this team take a step back. We'll see. But at this very time, the rhetoric is very much ice down your pants. So we'll see how it plays out moving forward. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSJROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Fun times for the Detroit Lions. And it makes it so much better to not have to really worry about Michigan or Michigan State as their seasons just tank and they get embarrassed on the national stage. But we'll talk about it next week. Big money, and I couldn't handle it this week because I already saw the big money coming in. I've already ranted about it a lot of places. So It sucks, but big money's coming in, and we'll see if it's spent wisely by the college teams here in town. And we'll see the reactions as people kind of learn about how NIL is going to shape college athletics moving forward as more teams embrace it and the big money hitters start coming in and saying, hey, I want a piece of the action too. So we'll talk all about it. Anywhere that you listen to your favorite audio content, type in Detroit Sports Podcast. Our content will find you all across the social media landscape, all across the internet, and really, truly believe it. Podcasts change the world. I'm not going to talk about it too deeply, but I truly believe that in a way that even blows my mind with the connection that you can build with people, with how people get information, with the fun, with teammates who can joke around about their teammates shitting their pants. So podcasts are fun. I know that some athletes don't look at it as, it's the new media and these kids are sharing information. I get it. I can get the old school nature of like, man, all these kids want to do is podcast and do their own thing. But at the same token, when an athlete has a situation that goes viral, it's awesome that one of his teammates who has a podcast can share his thoughts on it, and we can all laugh and have a good time with it and learn and grow and communicate and have a good time with it. So thank you for allowing us to be in the space for the last 10 years. Approaching, I think this is episode 590, approaching 10 weeks away from episode 600. I can't wait to plan it and to deliver another great podcast. I can't wait for next week for the latest and greatest episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.